and welcome to another edition of the Advocates LSU Sports Insider, brought to you by the folks at Champion Wealth Strategies. As you can see, we've changed things up a little bit today for this episode. We've optioned Perrin Keys to the minors, and we've traded Wilson Alexander for a couple of prospects to be named later. And we have taken our little program on the road, leaving our Advocate studios for the clubhouse here at Alex Box Stadium to talk to this man, LSU baseball coach Jay Johnson. Jay, thanks for being with us today.
Good to be with you guys. Thanks for coming over.
I'm sports columnist Scott Rabalais, and alongside me is our new LSU baseball beat writer, Koki Riley, freshly unwrapped from under the Christmas tree and ready to cover another highly anticipated LSU baseball season. Koki, it's great to see you.
Yeah, great to see you too, Scott. It's really excited to be here, and especially being here in this office today. So very excited for the season coming up, and it's going to be a great podcast today.
Koki is a veteran of covering LSU and LSU baseball, and he's going to do a great job on this for us on the beat this year. Jay, we appreciate your hospitality and taking time out to have a chance to talk with you. And since I'm the host, I will ask the first question. When you came to LSU, obviously the goal was to make this a championship program once again, and you've done that with last season's College World Series title, the 7th in LSU history and the first since 2009. My question is, are the challenges different now that you try to sustain the program at a championship level? And if so, what are they?
Yeah, I think what we try to do is just honor the process of what it takes to be successful. I think there can be a thought a lot of times that, LSU has won for a number of years. What Coach Burtman did was amazing. Coach Laval got to Omaha a couple times. Coach Maneri won a national championship, got to Omaha several times. But what happened in the midst of that is everybody saw what you could build in a baseball program in the SEC, and everybody has elevated themselves. I give Coach Burtman and Ron Polk from Mississippi State the credit for elevating SEC baseball to what it is today. So I think I'm just very aware of the challenges that lie ahead. And then all my thoughts go to how do we attack those challenges? And it's given our team a plan, our program having a plan to meet those as we go along. So to me, the work isn't a lot different. It comes back to, being very fundamentally sound, being the most competitive team we can be, and having the right people in your organization, in terms of character and talent, and working on that plan. And it's time. We're excited to do that again.
Yeah, just speaking about sort of raising your level of play, Thatcher Hurd was a guy who certainly did that in the second half of the season, and in Omaha especially. Is there, and you said at the beginning of the year, he was sort of a guy who needed to step up for you big time in order to win the national championship, and he did exactly that. Is there a guy who sort of fits that mold heading into this season for you guys, do you think?
I just think I said that early on, because I believed in Thatcher's talent so much. I think when you looked at it going into the season, he was still a relatively young pitcher. Was a two-way player in high school, and had his freshman season, cut short due to injury at UCLA. And, I have a different opinion on his season. I think we discussed this the other day, is if you take out 2 outings, he's probably an All-American, first team, second team, third team All-American. And so that was obviously huge. And for me, it's always about being in position to be successful and win enough games early, but you're constantly developing your team. For us, getting that 1% better on a daily basis, creating, the right type of identity or the right blueprint for winning, training the team to that, and you just keep improving. So my answer to that, Koki, would literally be every player in the program, because you look at it, we pointed out Thatcher, early on in that regard, but, how about Alex Milazzo, his improvement offensively? I mean, Cade Belloso's, 2023 season versus his 2021 season. If it wasn't for Paul Skeens being out of this world, Cade Belloso was the MVP of the College World Series. Gavin Dugas going from the outfield to the infield. Josh Pearson, being a good role player in and out of the lineup. And when it was time, we went with Josh Pearson. So there was a lot of stories on that team. And I think my point is there'll need to be a lot of stories on this team. And I think we have some really good candidates for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I probably at least should have mentioned this earlier, but I I got to speak with Coach earlier this week and do a story just sort of breaking down where the team is and where the pitching staff is, the lineup is heading into this upcoming preseason. So one of the things we definitely touched on was sort of the depth of this team's pitching staff. Is that in part because following year one and before he even got here, pitching depth was an issue with the program, and I think one of the things we sort of talked about was maybe a potential overcorrection of that and trying to really build up the depth of the staff, especially with left-handed pitching. So would you say? So how would you sort of evaluate sort of where you guys are in terms of the staff and what kind of strength could it be for you guys this year?
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. I think, everything we do within the program is done by design, not by default. And Coach Maneri, when I took over, was very straightforward. Like, this is where you're going to have to put the work in, relative to figuring out this first year and on the recruiting trail. And, we really went after that really hard, really fast, and got the right guys on the bus. I mean, think about, there's a lot of stories with 2023, but one of them was we overcame 4 significant pitching injuries and still won the national championship because we had incredible depth. And so we wanted to emulate that going forward. And then, with Paul doing what he did, which was out of this world, Ty Floyd, being an undefeated pitcher, Riley Cooper, he pitched in more wins than anybody in college baseball the last 3 years. So when you have that type of winning experience moving out the door, it's our job to replace it. And I feel like we've done that. And I feel like there's a few buckets of pitchers. You mentioned Thatcher, it's one of the best pitchers in the country, particularly the last 6 weeks of the season last year. Adding Luke Holman, big deal. I thought he was one of the best pitchers in the SEC last year. A guy like Gage Jump, who more people would be talking about if he had pitched last year. He missed last year because of Tommy John. Nate Ackenhausen, Gavin Guidry, Griffin Herring, 3 guys that were instrumental in us winning the national championship. I mean, whether it was a regional or multiple times in the College World Series from those guys, and then adding, more additional talent. Justin Laura, transfer from Xavier, I'm really, really excited about. We're going to go to him a lot. Cameron Johnson is as special a talent as I've ever been able to sneak through the draft, so to speak, and get to college. And it's not just, big body up to 97 miles an hour with a ton of movement. Like, he's mature beyond his years in terms of how he goes about his business, and he'll continue to get better. Kate Anderson is a future star, and in our opinion. And then there's the improvement of the guys that maybe didn't have huge roles last year. Aiden Moffitt, DJ Primo, those guys didn't pitch a lot for us last year. And at some point, somebody in the stadium is going to go like, wait a minute, that guy was here last year?
Yeah.
Which is really exciting. And, Christian Little, Sam Dutton, there's been really good improvement from that kind of group. So we're really excited about the staff. And frankly, you need it, with the schedule that we're going to play and the challenges that come along with it.
And especially with left-handed pitching, you guys have, 8 or 9 left-handed pitchers. And, I think the first year you were here, you only had 2 or 3. So what sort of versatility does that give you, especially given the fact that not all these lefties are built the same?
Yeah, it gives you a ton of versatility. I learned that from Augie Garrido. I got a chance to sit down with him in 2004. And, we went through a bunch of things. And, he talked about the importance of left-handed hitting and left-handed pitching and building a championship caliber team. And that's something that always stuck with me. And we had to be really deliberate about, doing that. We got it a little further along last year. And then this year really, really lined up, with the combination of the 22 and the 23 recruiting classes. And certainly in a spot that we feel really good about it. I mean, I've never had 10 before, but all 10 guys can make a positive contribution.
You've got great depth at the catcher position with all 3 catchers returning from last year's team, Hayden Travinsky, Alex Malazzo, and Brady Neal. How do you plan to use these guys this year? Do you anticipate one of them getting more starts than the other? Can you use any of them at different positions other than the designated hitter?
Yeah, really good question. And in terms of depth, it's hard for me to think anybody has a better catching situation than we do going into the 2024 season. You're talking about not one, not two, but 3 players that got significant experience on a national championship caliber team. And, Brady did a great job and earned the starting job last year, and we were never not the number 1 team in the country with him as a starting catcher. Did a great job handling the pitching staff, hit some key home runs off of some of the better pitchers in the country, really took good at-bats, at a lower average, but at a really high on-base percentage. And that speaks to his maturity as a hitter. Couldn't be more proud of Alex Milazzo. We won all 5 of the games that he started in Omaha. He was really big in the back half of the SEC schedule defensively and really improved as a move the offense type player. And then there was a 6-7 week period there with Hayden where it might have got overshadowed a little bit because of Dylan and Tommy, but there wasn't a more dangerous hitter in college baseball than Hayden. All 3 of those guys are going to play. As we sit here today, I think there's 11 or 12 guys that are kind of competing for starting spots. All 3 of the catchers are in those 11 or 12 guys. So they're all going to get plenty of opportunities.
Yeah, and Scott mentions the catchers, obviously, and with those catchers, you also want some versatility with a few of those guys. Like, look at a guy like Brady Neal, for example, who you're working at second base a little bit, third base, in the outfield. In terms of that defensive versatility, like how important is to have guys like him and guys like Josh Pearson, who you're moving from the outfield to second base? What does that open up for you guys?
Yeah, I always viewed it as my job to put our team in the best chance to be successful, and sometimes that means moving the parts. I mentioned earlier about you want to be in position to be able to win games and improve and figure out your best team as you're going forward. And we have some versatility with what some guys can do. Brady, moving into the infield. Jared Jones, being able to go back and catch if we needed to. Jake Brown is going to play a lot in the outfield. He could play first base, moving Josh to second base. And all these things are important. And, there's times where I've had like a rotating second baseman or third baseman, as crazy as that sounds, but it allows you to maximize everybody's skills. And it allows more guys to make a positive contribution to winning, which I really think helps your team dynamic. So there's a production side of it that it helps, and there's a team side of it that it helps. I learned this from Chris Peterson, the old football coach at Washington. He told me a story one time that at Boise State, they weren't as deep at wide receiver, because they weren't a Power 5 school, but he'd get some backup receivers in on plays that were just like running plays and get those backup receivers just to run the DB down the field to tire him out. But his point was it got those guys involved in winning.
Yeah.
In baseball, it's a little harder to do that,
Yeah.
but it's the same kind of thing. The more you can do that, the better team dynamic you build.
Yeah, and it also sort of maximizes some of the left-handed hitters. Like Josh is a left-handed hitter, Brady Neal's a left-handed hitter, get some extra lefties in the order. How important is for those lefties and even younger lefties like Jake Brown and Ashton Larson to produce this season, just to keep some balance in the order when it comes to your left and right scenarios, I guess? Yeah,
I think it helps. And just for our more advanced, or I would say maybe our more experienced hitters, just tend to be right-handed, this year.
Yeah.
And, the draft impacted that a little bit in 2022. 2 years ago, we only lost one player this year, but it was a left-handed hitter. But I'm pretty comfortable with where we're at. And I think the game's changed a little bit. And we're so ahead of it scouting-wise. And Jamie Tutko helps me tremendously in terms of the things that we put together to prepare for the games, to try to find the sweet spots or the best matchups, whether it's pitchers or hitters. And we can train to it. And, I'm very thoughtful of that. I do believe in left-handed hitting, as I said. Really excited about, you mentioned Jake Brown's emergence. Really excited Brady is getting healthy. Really excited to have Josh back with as many at-bats. And there's some other guys just on the peripheral. Stephen Milam, is a young infielder that we like a lot. That's a switch hitter. You mentioned Ashton Larson as a freshman that I think is going to be a really good player. Zeb Riddell, who redshirted last year, kind of in the old Coach Bertman model. He wouldn't have got a lot of playing time in that outfield last year. So I think we're going to be fine in that regard. And I do want, and we're always striving for balance in our team.
Yeah, and in terms of just sort of sticking with this theme of positional versatility and balance. Like you also have two guys who, at least in theory, are two-way guys, and that's Gavin Guidry and that's Jake Brown, who we've already just talked about. How do you go about individualizing their plans to maximize both sides of the ball, and especially the one side of the ball that you feel like they fit within the team structure, which is also something that we talked about earlier this week?
Yeah, I think with both of them, they're both tremendous competitors. I mean, these guys are what I want LSU players to be made up of. And that's the first thing that stands out. I think, when you look at Gavin, there probably wasn't a more important relief pitcher in college baseball the back half of last year. The guy finished 2 games in the regional, 1 in the super regional, and pitched 4 times in Omaha. He's the only guy with that resume and returning in the country. And he has the competitive makeup that you need in a closer. I've always thought the Friday pitcher and the closer, they just have to be different cats in terms of having that it factor, and Gavin has that. So that's going to be his most important role on this team. So what's great about it, he's such a good athlete that he can provide some position player value as well, whether that's his running speed, his ability to bunt, defend if necessary. And as we spoke about, you get into those SEC weekends where you only have 27 players, like you could actually use him, and maybe it's a game we weren't going to use him, on the mound. In terms of Jake, was a draft prospect as a pitcher, and he's certainly going to have a great pitching future here, but it's almost like the flip side in terms of the needs of the team and how impressive he was as an offensive player. Like, that's probably where more of his work is going to go at the outset of this thing. And, really excited about both of them. And, younger players, like if you're looking for guys that, Coach Johnson likes and is going to want to bring into the program, that's 2 really good examples.
Jay, before we started our recording, we were talking about a painting you have here in your office that someone gave you about last season in the national championship. I know you knew there was a lot of passion and when you came here about LSU baseball and the tradition and how much it means to people. But since winning the national championship, and obviously everyone loves a winner, but since winning the national championship, have you gotten a deeper appreciation for that? Have you found out even more from being in Omaha and since you guys got back about what that title has meant and what this program means to LSU fans?
Yeah, thanks for asking that question, and got a completely new appreciation of the whole gamut of all of it. The first year, I thought we had a very successful season. It was awesome. I would pick out like a Tuesday night game late in the season, and it still felt like a super regional atmosphere. And I'm so appreciative to that, because there may be a prettier ballpark around the country, even though this place is beautiful. There's no home field like the Bucs, and that's entirely because of our fans. So that was kind of the baseline going into last year. And then going to Omaha with LSU was a completely different experience. And the army that was in that stadium, every time we played, it felt like the box stacked on top of each other 3 times. And I tell people all the time, I have 2 new greatest moments of my life. One was when Tommy White hit the home run and the ball actually went over the fence against Wake Forest. I felt something in my body I never felt before. And then the other one was when we came back into the hotel at the Hilton after we won. And I mean, it took us a while to get back. Like, we were milking it at the field together for a while, and we walked back in 2.5, 3 hours later. I mean, and this place is wall to wall, and I got like grown men sobbing, hugging me, telling me thank you, and this was the greatest moment of their life. And I just, that passion.
After winning the title or after beating Wake Forest?
After winning the actually both, to be honest with you, but winning the championship. And it gave me a greater appreciation for that. And, I'm very thankful for that. And I mentioned this in, I think, my introductory press conference is our fans are amazing, and it's only a positive, and one of the reasons why this is a unique place and a really special place.
Yeah, and that you mentioned it, Tommy White's home run. Obviously he produced one of the greatest moments in your life, and one of the greatest moments in many LSU fans' lives potentially as well. So, like, he's also been, dealing with a shoulder injury, and he's been rehabbing over the last, 6-7 months. And So, could you sort of give us an update on where he is and what his outset is heading into the next season?
Yeah, he had surgery very shortly after the College World Series, and I think if everybody knew the level of pain he played with the entire season, two things: you would appreciate Tommy even more, and be way more impressed with what he did, which was have one of the best seasons in all of college baseball last year. So he had the surgery. Very slow with the recovery. We held him out of fall baseball. He began a hitting program at the end of November, and he began his throwing program about mid-December. His body is in really good shape. That was the one thing he could kind of take care of, and he did a terrific job with that. I'm really excited to get him moving, starting on Monday. You'll see us in our fall our lead-up scrimmage games. You'll see him come to the plate a lot to make up for some time, in the fall and kind of try to get a fall baseball's worth of at-bats in the 12 scrimmages that we're going to have leading into the season. For me, he's another guy. I mentioned this was Gavin and Jake. That's a perfect LSU baseball player relative to his competitive nature. Everybody can see the talent, but the toughness to get through that injury, the competitiveness to show up every single at-bat. Obviously, we need him, and really pleased he's trending the right way from a health standpoint.
And between him, Jared, and Travinsky, of course, they're sort of like the power trio of your lineup. How important is it going to? How important do you think it's going to be to hit home runs on this team? And when you lose a guy like Dylan, especially because. As you've said in the past, the SEC, there's a lot of small parks, and like hitting the ball out of the ballpark is a pretty important aspect of winning games.
100% relative to Dylan. Let's get this out there right now.
Yeah.
He was worth a minimum of 3 runs a game by himself, offensively and defensively. And so one of the things that'll be important is that we win or are really good, functional, effective in winning close games. Just by him not being here, that'll be a change, However, we won a lot of games by 7, 8, and 10 runs last year. And with that being said, I have great confidence. Now, relative to your question about those 3 big hitters, you're right. It's the home run thing is important because the pitching in the Southeastern Conference is so good now. It's really hard to string 3 hits together at one time to score a run. So when you can get one with one swing, that's a big deal. I think, the key for Tommy, Hayden, and Jared is simply not to try to do too much. I mean, those are very large human beings, quintessential old Coach Burtman gorilla ball style players. Their key is to not do too much, to manage the strike zone, to hit mistakes, to take good at-bats with 2 strikes, to move the offense, get that 1 RBI when there was 1 RBI to get. And that's what Tommy's season was so special. I mean, at 105 RBIs on 23 or 24 home runs. So how many good at-bats was there? The single to right field, the sac fly to deep center field. And I view Hayden as that type of hitter as well, and he had that type of fall as well. I think Jared is just scratching the surface with how good he's going to be, and we made some real specific adjustments, and I can't wait to get back out there with those guys and get them locked in to be the capable hitters that I know that they are.
And they're the sort of guys who, can hit home runs by accident. They're just so big and strong, and, it's going to be really fun to watch this season. So.
Absolutely.
Jay, you won a national championship, and you become a more sage, more wise person. I guess people want to hear your comments about things. I want to ask you about all the changes we're seeing in college athletics now, with all the conferences going into. I mean, the conference you were in before is no longer there in the Pac-12. And everyone's been focused on the football aspect of it, but not a lot of people are focusing on what it means for all the other sports. I mean, I assume Maryland is going to have to go to Oregon to play a Big Ten baseball series at some point, right? And vice versa. Do you think enough attention has been paid to that, to what it means to all the non-football sports, especially sports like yours or softball, where you have to go play several games and not just one? And where do you see this going?
This job, being the coach here, and really any job that I have, to do the best I can do at it, for me, it requires my full attention. And I'm very thankful. Like, we have really smart people out there, like Greg Sankey, is the commissioner of the SEC, Herb Vincent, Matt Boyer at the SEC office, that really work on our behalf to try to put the SEC in the best position possible. A lot of things don't make a ton of sense at times, but I never really worry about it. It's almost like, okay, what is the rules? What are the parameters? We're going to stay within those, but we need to utilize them to enhance or elevate LSU baseball. And I'm not really avoiding the question. It's like, that's how I legitimately think about these things. Do I have opinions on them? Sure. I think, the portal thing certainly helped us, win a national championship, helped us survive, in 2022 at LSU. Every program in the SEC is going to continue to do that. Well, I may like to, just recruit high school players and develop them. I think sometimes that's where our coaching shines. And so it takes away some of that. However, we can't just ignore it. Otherwise, we're going to get steamrolled, and it's my job to figure out what the new landscape is, the new rules, and try to use them to our advantage. So literally, whether it's portal, it's conference realignment, NIL, you name it, I try to stay in my lane, so to speak.
But there are more challenges, right, than
for sure.
when you played.
Yeah,
or when you
it's a
start coaching.
different. What I would say is sometimes you spend your time doing different things, and so if it was a 15-hour day before, it's a 17-hour day, or it's a 16-and-a-half-hour day, and there's 90 minutes in there of you not doing something that you used to do. I'll give you an example. Because of the transfer portal and the importance of that and the urgency of it for the very next season, while we were in Omaha, I never left my room other than to go to the ballpark. It was literally either get a coffee in the morning, get back up there, I'm watching video, preparing the game plan, having a staff meeting, and there was 90 minutes to 2 hours a day that were just completely devoted to recruiting, and while we were there, Michael Braswell and Justin Lohr and Cade Woods all committed to us for this year. We were setting the stage with Luke Holman, with Gage Jump, with Mac Bingham, once those guys entered the portal. So it's more, that's just an example of like, okay, it's different. Because in the past, you're only missing like next year's high school class if you're in Omaha. And so you just have to look at things and operate a little bit differently.
And speaking of changes in really all of college sports, as we're recording this, Nick Saban has, I guess, retired from college football. You've talked about Saban as someone who has really inspired you as a coach. What are your sort of thoughts on, yesterday's momentous news and just your thoughts on Saban in general?
Yeah, I can believe it. I mean, he's 72 years old. The level of excellence in terms of the winning, that's one thing. Like in this modern era of college football, we may never see that again. But for me, the part I've been so consumed with over all these years, this is long before being at LSU, this is about studying coaches outside of my dad. He is my favorite coach, or the one that I would say, like, hey, I would want to implement things that I've heard him talk about or do with their team. And so I've paid close attention to Alabama football for the entirety of his tenure. I remember I was the associate head coach at San Diego, and the day he was hired, the press conference was on in my office, and my boss at the time, Rich Hill, walked in and he goes, hey, turn this up, listen to it. Like, this is how this is supposed to be done. And it was like this light went off immediately, like, whoa. And then you start talking about process and defining the process for your players and then committing to it. And, that complacency is the greatest threat to excellence. He had a clip the other day just about freshmen, you know what I mean? And all these guys that leave for the draft after junior year, not one pro team has ever asked him, how much did the guy play as a freshman? They want to know what they developed into.
Yeah.
And so I can take that here. It's LSU baseball. And we're getting some of the top freshmen in the country, but it's a challenge to be exactly where you want to be, at that time. But that's okay, because when the Kansas City Royals draft you as a junior, they're not going to ask, did you play as a freshman?
Yeah. Like that makes a ton of sense. Have you ever met Nick Saban?
I have not.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to
You
find
might have time now.
I'm going to find a way to get that done at some point. And, I have a mutual person, a couple actually, that have mentioned like they'd like us to connect at some point. So at some point at the appropriate time, which is not right now,
Yeah.
I'm gonna fire the bullet to make that happen. Good for LSU football, though. That's the real story.
Yes,
That's
that
the
is
real
the
Jay
story.
Johnson
story.
is always looking for the angles.
That's
This is an angle.
That's the real
Yeah.
story, though. I mean, and Coach Kelly, just real quickly, I think the same way about him. I really enjoy getting to communicate with him, and I think he's done a terrific job here. And again, you don't always see it in the result the way you want it to be, but I mean, they've won 20 games. I think they're well positioned for the future, and just how he is going about, building the program is something I pay attention to.
Are there things about coaching that you've learned from Coach Kelly now that not just now that we're on this topic?
Yeah, I think he's done a terrific job of keeping like his focus on the right thing. And when you coach at a place like this, if you're not a real coach, you can get taken off track really quickly. I'll tell you the other thing that I love the most about Coach Kelly. We've won a lot of close games in the last 2 years. And so I really admire how we've come out after halftime. And I really admire how well we've played in the close games. And I think that has a lot to do with his ability to teach fundamentals, manage the game, all of those things that I think a head coach needs to be good at. I think he's exceptional at that.
You guys are a pretty good group here at LSU right now. Coach Kelly, Kim Mulkey, she's just in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Dennis Shaver.
Yeah.
I mean, really, there are things you can learn from each other, right?
100%. I'm going to share this story. She might get mad at me, but when Coach Mulkey won her 700th game, I was like, 700 wins in basketball. That's amazing. So I'm going to call her and congratulate her on winning 700 games. She answers the phone and says, "If you can't play any defense, I don't got no time to talk to you." I was like, "Hey, Coach, how are you doing?" But yeah, I think the world of these people that are the leaders of these programs here, and it's been pretty cool, unbelievable life experience, and taking that a step further for me, without question, the best part of being the coach here is getting the time I get to spend with Coach Burtman and Coach Maneri. I value every second that I'm with those guys, and that's been the coolest part of this for me.
Well, we will have to leave it there today. That's all the time we have for today. I want to thank Jay. Thank you, Jay, for your time and for giving us some insights into the program and the season today. And best of luck, of course, for the 24 season. I want to take a little time to give ourselves a little plug here as well. We're probably the only news organization in the country that covers every single game of a college baseball season. I can't think of another one. Maybe you've come across one, but
no, this is unreal, and I want to say I really appreciate that because it puts our program at a different place in the interest level that we have in our programs. Amazing, and it's why players want to come here. So thank you for contributing to that.
Well, thank you.
We'd
hear about it from your fans and the readers if we didn't cover every game. But we'll be at every game this season as usual, from the very first pitch to the very last out of 2024. So follow us at theadvocate.com, NOLA.com, and The Advocate and the Times-Picayune, and we'll bring you all the coverage of LSU baseball, of course, all the LSU sports for you throughout the year. So thank you once again for watching today and being with us. We appreciate it. On behalf of myself and Koki Riley and Robert Young behind the scenes, I'm Scott Rabalais, and this has been the LSU Sports Insider presented by Champion Wealth Strategies.